Ever play a game and think about all the little things that make it work? Like how fast the dialogue pops up, where you go when you die, or even how the camera follows you around? Those aren't accidents, they're choices made by the developers. Even the sounds that make the game world come alive, those are very carefully picked. If you want to get into game dev, you need to make those choices. And now that you've chosen to explore game development, or at least you're a little bit curious, the first choice that you will need to make is the right tools for the job. Think of it like this. You've got game engines, which are like all-in-one workshops packed with features specifically for making games. They often have things like physics systems built in, or ready-made templates to get you started. But they can also be a bit limiting. On the other hand, you've got more generous purpose tools like IDEs. These give you ultimate freedom, but you've also got a blank canvas to start with. If you're a coding wizard, you can even just use a basic text editor and build your game from scratch. That's how some of the coolest games out there were made. But for most people starting out, a game engine is the way to go. When it comes to choosing a game engine, there are multiple options, some more specific than others. Today I'll be listing what I like to call the big three. Unity is super popular, works for both 2D and 3D, and you will be using C# for coding. It's got a really professional feel, but honestly, it can be a bit overwhelming, in my opinion at least. Unreal Engine is the industry standard for those jaw-dropping, graphically intense 3D games. If you're dreaming of making the next big AAA title, Unreal and C++ are your go-to. Then there is Godot, which is the engine I've personally chosen to focus on these days. It's got a friendly learning curve and uses a cool visual scripting system called JDScript. I'm actually learning Godot live on Twitch right now, so come join me. You can find the link in the description. I'll also be making a separate video soon diving deeper into the differences between these engines, so you might wanna subscribe for that. Now remember, when you're first learning to make games, you don't have to commit to any of those. Sure, you do have to invest some time to really get a feel for things and make something, but you will have all the time in the world to experiment, figure out what works for you. I have tried literally every game engine under the sun by now, so you will be good. Okay, so you've picked your engine, but now, learning how to actually use it and bring your game to life. Most people start with online tutorials, and that's totally fine. But be careful not to fall into the trap of tutorial hell. That's where you get used to just copying code that you never really learn how to think like a programmer. Here's the key. Whenever you're following a tutorial, don't just blindly copy and paste. For every line of code, ask yourself, what is this actually doing? Try to understand what each piece of the puzzle means. If you get stuck, that's where the documentation comes in. Think of it as the instruction manual for your game engine. Seriously, bookmark that thing and keep it close. It's a lifesaver. Tutorials are great for getting started, but eventually you'll need to break free and start experimenting on your own. Don't be afraid to try things, make mistakes, learn from them. And hey, it's okay to peek back at your old code and do some Googling along the way. Another great way to level up your coding skills is by learning some basic programming concepts. There are tons of online courses and resources out there, and if you're in school, see if there are any coding classes you can take. Trust me, a little coding knowledge goes a long way in game development. Because coding is the heart and soul of game development. It puts the dev into game dev. A lot of people are drawn to game development because they love playing games, but it's important to remember that it's also about building and creating. You've got to enjoy the process of figuring things out, testing different approaches, and bringing your vision to life through code. I used to get frustrated when things didn't work right away, but I've learned to embrace those challenges. There is nothing quite like that aha moment when you finally crack the code and see your game working just the way you imagined. Now, away from coding, if you're more into art, we have that too. Art and sound are important parts of the experience too, but they can be a bit of a rabbit hole to go down. We could spend a whole video just talking about art and sound design, and I actually plan to soon. But for now, just know that there are tons of resources out there. If you're interested in creating your own art, pixel art can be a great place to start, with tools like Sprite and Piscal. For music and sound effects, my favorite tool to use is Beatbox, or you can even use sounds from the asset stores. The main thing when you're just starting out is to focus on the core elements of your game. Don't get bogged down in the art and sound just yet. There is plenty of time to explore those later. As you can probably tell by now, game development involves a lot of moving parts. Staying organized is super important. You might start with just a simple idea in a Notes app or a Google Doc, but trust me, things can get complex fast. You're working on your game and suddenly you have ideas for different levels, characters with unique backstories, weapons with different stats. It can very quickly become overwhelming. That's where dedicated organization tools come in. Personally, I love using Obsidian to keep my projects in order. It's not your typical note-taking app. It's built around the idea of a second brain and uses a network of interconnected nodes to help you visualize and organize your thoughts. Think of it like creating your own personal wiki for your game. But if Obsidian isn't your style, Notion, Trello, and ClickUp are all great options too. Notion is super flexible and lets you customize your workspace in tons of ways. Trello uses a Kanban board system, which is great for visualizing your workflow and tracking tasks. And ClickUp is packed with features like mind maps and Gantt charts to help you plan and manage your project. But the most important tip, regardless of which tool you use, track your progress. Because it's so easy to get discouraged in game development when you don't see big results right away. Even small steps forward are worth celebrating. I like to use my organization tool to keep a daily log of what I've accomplished. Some days it might be learned about collision detection in Godot. Other days it might be designed the main character's sprite. Seeing those wins add up over time is incredibly motivating. Plus, it's really satisfying to look back and see how far you have come. Which is also why it's important to have people to share with. Because it's eventually more fun with friends. Having a community, whether it's online or in real life, can make a huge difference. Being able to share your progress with people who get what you're doing, get feedback on your ideas, and brainstorm together is incredibly motivating and helps you stay connected to why you started making games in the first place. And there are tons of ways to find your game dev community. Discord servers are a great place to start. There are servers for specific game engines, genres, and even just general game development. It's a great way to meet people, ask questions, and get inspired. If you're in school, see if there is a game dev club or group you can join. And of course, don't underestimate the power of good old-fashioned friends who share your passion. Sharing your work and getting feedback can be a bit scary at first, but it's so worth it. It helps you see your game from a fresh perspective, catch things you might have missed, and get encouragement when you need it most. Plus, celebrating those wins with others is way more fun than celebrating alone. So, don't be afraid to put yourself out there and connect with other game devs. Creativity thrives in community, and you might just make some lifelong friends along the way. So now you might ask, how can I share my games with the world? Well, there are awesome platforms like itch.io where you can upload your projects for free. People can check out your games there, play them, and even download or buy them if you want. You can also share your game art and other creations. And the cool thing is, it doesn't have to be finished. itch.io even hosts a ton of game jams, which are events where you make a game in a short amount of time based on a theme. It's a super fun way to challenge yourself and get better at game development. So, if I have to leave you with one advice, is that people need people. And the harder things get, the more people need people. So, make sure to find your people and have fun coding.